The old cabin stood forgotten at the edge of Whisper Ridge, its weathered boards and sagging roof a monument to abandoned dreams. Jack Harmon, a local mountain boy with calloused hands and empty pockets, counted out the last of his savings, just enough to buy this neglected property and the forgotten contents within. The realtor had laughed when he signed the papers, calling it a junkyard with a roof. But desperation has a way of redefining opportunity. As Jack pushed open the creaking door, dust motes danced in the afternoon light, illuminating piles of discarded furniture, old boxes, and strange artifacts that seemed to whisper secrets from another time. What exactly was hidden among these forgotten treasures, and why did the previous owner disappear without taking anything? Could the answer change everything for a boy with nothing left to lose? The floorboards groaned beneath Jack's feet as he dragged his threadbare sleeping bag into the least cluttered corner of the main room. Night had fallen quickly in the mountains, the darkness absolute beyond the cabin's grimy windows. His flashlight cast long shadows across piles of boxes, furniture draped in sheets, and shelves overflowing with objects he couldn't yet identify. "Home sweet home," he muttered, voice barely audible over the mountain wind, whistling through gaps in the cabin walls. After setting up a battery-powered lantern, Jack rummaged through his backpack for the sandwich he'd packed earlier. One meal a day, all he could afford until he sorted through enough of this junk to sell something valuable. He took a bite, chewing slowly while studying his surroundings. A thunderous crack from overhead made him jump. Just a tree branch against the roof, he reasoned, but his heart continued hammering. The realtor hadn't been exaggerating about the cabin's condition, but he'd failed to mention how it seemed to breathe with the mountain's rhythm, expanding, contracting, sighing. Jack unfolded the property deed, running his fingers over the yellowed paper. Strange notations crowded the margins, symbols that weren't quite words, numbers arranged in patterns he didn't understand. The previous owner, Elijah Blackwood, had signed it with an unusually intricate flourish. Sleep evaded Jack despite his exhaustion. Every sound, the house settling, rodents scurrying behind walls, wind through the trees, kept his senses on high alert. Near midnight he gave up and decided to explore with his flashlight. In what must have been the study, bookshelves sagged under the weight of hundreds of volumes. Jack pulled one out at random. A treatise on celestial navigation, its pages covered with handwritten notes. He replaced it and selected another, a journal with entries dating back to 1978. A fragment caught his eye. Day 341 of the search. The alignment approaches. If my calculations are correct, the convergence happens once every 20 years. I've nearly triangulated the location. What lies beyond the threshold must remain sealed, but I must know the truth. The journal ended abruptly mid-sentence. Jack set it aside, unsettled. A knock at the door nearly stopped his heart. He approached cautiously, flashlight beam wobbling in his unsteady hand. Through a crack in the curtains, he made out the silhouette of an elderly woman. After a moment's hesitation, he opened the door. "Thought I saw lights," she said without preamble. Her face was deeply lined, eyes sharp beneath white brows. "You the one bought Blackwood's place?" "Yes, ma'am," Jack answered. "Jack Harmon." She didn't offer her name in return. "You settling in all right?" "Just fine, thank you." The woman's gaze traveled past him, surveying the cluttered interior. Blackwood left in a hurry. Never came back for his things. "Do you know what happened to him?" Something flickered across her weathered face. "Some things are better left buried, young man, especially in these mountains." She turned to leave, then paused. "Word of advice, what you find here, some of it ain't meant to be found." Before Jack could respond, she disappeared into the darkness, the sound of her footsteps fading quickly. Too unnerved to sleep, Jack continued exploring. In the study, a leather-bound book caught his attention, heavier than it should be. When he opened it, the pages had been hollowed out, forming a secret compartment. Inside lay an ornate brass skeleton key, its bow formed in an unusual pattern of interlocking circles. Jack turned it over in his palm, feeling its substantial weight. It was cold to the touch, almost unnaturally so, and didn't match any keyhole he'd seen in the cabin. Yet something told him it was important, perhaps the most valuable thing he'd found so far. Outside, an owl hooted 3 times. Jack pocketed the key and returned to his sleeping bag, finally exhausted enough to drift off. His dreams were filled with strange symbols, winding mountain paths, and a door deep within the earth that should never be opened. Morning light filtered through dusty windows when Jack awoke, momentarily confused by his surroundings. The cabin looked different in daylight, less ominous, more a testament to someone's obsession. Despite the neighbor's warning and the unsettling journal, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This place, with all its mysteries, was his now. And somewhere among the clutter might lie answers worth far more than the money he'd spent on this gamble. Jack fingered the skeleton key in his pocket and began to plan how he would methodically sort through the previous owner's life, unaware that some secrets resist being uncovered and others actively fight back. Morning light revealed the true extent of the chaos. Jack stood in the center of the main room, hands on his hips, surveying the monumental task ahead. He'd need a system, 3 piles, keep, sell, and trash. With methodical patience, he began in the corner nearest the door. Most items were mundane: chipped dishes, worn furniture, outdated clothing. But interspersed among the ordinary were oddities that gave him pause. A drawer full of compasses with their needles removed. A collection of rocks labeled with coordinates and dates. Weather records spanning decades with certain dates circled in red. By midday, Jack had cleared only a small section. Sweat dampened his shirt as he dragged a heavy trunk from beneath a table. The lock was rusted, but gave way with a few strikes from a hammer. Inside lay folded clothing, old letters, and a leather-bound book of pressed flowers. Beneath these, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, he found a photograph in a tarnished silver frame. The sepia image showed a family posed stiffly before this very cabin, though it appeared new in the picture. A stern-faced man stood behind a seated woman holding an infant. A young boy of perhaps 7 stood to the side. But where the older child's face should have been, someone had carefully scratched away the emulsion, leaving a blank void in the otherwise pristine photograph. Jack turned it over. Written in faded ink, "Blackwood Family, 1932. He placed the photograph carefully in his keep pile. As the afternoon progressed, patterns emerged in Elijah Blackwood's possessions. Maps, dozens of them, covered nearly every wall when Jack removed the sheets draped over them. Each was marked with similar symbols to those in the deed's margins. Red threads connected specific locations, forming a web that converged on a section of the mountain range visible from the cabin's windows. In a roll-top desk, Jack discovered correspondence suggesting Elijah had once been wealthy. Letters from banks, investment firms, and eventually creditors told the story of a fortune methodically liquidated. The most recent letter, dated 15 years ago, referenced continued funding for your mountain expedition and was signed by someone identified only as a fellow seeker. More troubling were the newspaper clippings about missing hikers in the region, some yellowing with age, others more recent. Elijah had annotated these with cryptic notes. Another one taken, and the cycle continues. When shadows lengthened, Jack decided to make a supply run into town. The hardware store was small, but well-stocked. As Jack gathered cleaning supplies, the owner, a barrel-chested man with a grey beard, approached. "You're staying at the old Blackwood place," he stated, not a question. Jack nodded. "Just bought it. Didn't know it was for sale." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Blackwood family's been here since the valley was settled." "Respected name once." Jack selected a box of trash bags. "What happened to them?" The owner's demeanor shifted subtly. Elijah was the last. Brilliant man, engineering degree from back east. Came home after his parents died, started acting strange. Obsessed with those mountains. He nodded toward the window. Sold everything eventually. People thought he'd found gold or something up there. Never shared what he was really looking for, though. Any idea where he went? Just disappeared one day about 10 years back. Some say he finally found what he was looking for. The man leaned closer. Others say it found him. Jack paid for his supplies, uncomfortable under the owner's scrutiny. When he returned to the cabin, something felt different. He paused in the doorway, eyes scanning the room. The piles he'd made seemed slightly disturbed. The photograph he'd found, hadn't he left it on top of the keep pile? Now it lay on the floor, several feet away. A chill ran down his spine, despite the summer heat. Surely he'd just bumped the pile on his way out. Yet as he moved through the cabin, other small things seemed out of place. A book opened. A chair angled differently. "Hello?" he called, feeling foolish. Only silence answered. That evening, as he sorted through more papers, Jack found a journal detailing Elijah's growing obsession. It chronicled increasingly erratic behavior, sleepless nights watching the stars, expeditions into remote mountain areas, and references to signals only he could detect. Jack glanced up at the scratched-out face in the photograph he'd propped on a shelf. What had driven Elijah Blackwood to erase his own child from family memory? And more importantly, what had he been searching for with such single-minded determination that he'd sacrifice everything to find it? The cabin creaked around him, as if considering whether to reveal its secrets or keep them buried for another 20 years. Dawn broke with thin mountain light filtering through the trees. Jack stepped onto the cabin's porch, coffee mug in hand, surveying the surrounding wilderness. Pine-covered slopes climbed in all directions, the nearest neighbor's chimney smoke barely visible in the distance. Solitude had drawn him here, but now the isolation felt different, watchful rather than peaceful. After breakfast, he set out to explore the property. The cabin sat on 3 acres, according to the deed, bordered by national forest on 2 sides. As Jack followed a faint trail into the woods, the morning stillness was broken only by birdsong and the crunch of pine needles underfoot. 100 yards in, he noticed the first carving, a symbol etched into a pine trunk at eye level. It resembled a compass rose, but with additional markings that matched those in the margins of Elijah's deed. Further along, he found another tree similarly marked, then another. They formed a line pointing deeper into the forest, away from established trails. Jack followed the marked trees for nearly an hour before stopping, an uneasy feeling growing with each step. The forest had gone quiet. No birds, no rustling undergrowth, just the sound of his own breathing and the distinct sensation of being observed. "Hello?" he called, voice swallowed by the dense foliage. No response came, yet the feeling persisted. He turned back, walking quickly. The symbols seemed different on the return journey, as if subtly altered since he'd passed them earlier. Imagination, he told himself, quickening his pace nonetheless. That afternoon, Jack drove into town to visit the local library, a single-story brick building with a faded sign. Inside, a woman perhaps his own age, early 30s, looked up from the circulation desk. "Can I help you?" Her smile was friendly but cautious, as all the locals seemed to be with him. "I'm researching the history of a property I just bought." "The old Blackwood cabin?" Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe concern. "I'm Sarah Conley," she offered. "My grandmother knew the Blackwoods well." "What specifically are you looking for?" Jack explained his interest in the property's history and the strange markings he'd found. Sarah led him to a shelf of local history books. "The Blackwoods were among the original settlers here in 1879, she explained, pulling down a volume. "Respected family until Elijah became eccentric." "What kind of eccentric?" She hesitated. "My grandmother said he became obsessed with some kind of treasure hunt in the mountains."
Spent decades on it.
She never believed it was actual treasure, though. What did she think it was? Sarah's voice lowered. Something better left alone, according to her. She smiled tightly. Her grandmother had a flair for the dramatic. Jack spent hours poring over local records, finding little beyond what Sarah had shared. As closing time approached, Sarah placed a slip of paper before him. "My number," she explained, "in case you have more questions. My grandmother's journals might have information about the Blackwoods." I could look through them. Jack thanked her, sensing an ally, perhaps the only one in town. Back at the cabin, the setting sun cast long shadows through the windows. Jack resumed his sorting, tackling the study's desk drawers. In one, something rattled behind a false back panel. Prying it loose revealed a hidden compartment containing an antique brass compass in a leather case. Unlike ordinary compasses, this one's needle didn't point north. No matter how Jack rotated it, the needle remained fixed, pointing toward a specific point in the mountains, the same direction as the symbols carved in the trees. Jack compared it with the maps on the walls. The needle aimed precisely at the spot where Elijah's red threads converged. He tested the compass by walking around the cabin's perimeter. The needle adjusted, always pointing to that same location. Returning inside, Jack placed the compass on the desk, fascinated by its strange behavior. The phone he'd had installed that morning rang, startling him. "Mr. Harmon," Sarah's voice came through. "I found something in my grandmother's journals. She mentions Elijah asking about periodic disappearances in the mountains, dating back to the 1800s. Always in the same area, always spaced exactly 20 years apart." Jack's gaze drifted to the newspaper clippings about missing hikers. "What else?" "She wrote that Elijah became convinced something was out there. Something that—" Sarah hesitated. "I know how this sounds, but she claimed Elijah believed something was hibernating in the mountains, waking only in cycles." The call ended with Sarah promising to share more from her grandmother's journals. Jack hung up, unsettled. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. He double-checked the locks before returning to his sleeping bag. Hours later, he woke with a start. The cabin door stood wide open, mountain air flowing in, despite being certain he'd locked it. On the threshold lay a small carved wooden figure he'd never seen before, its features worn smooth by handling. Jack pocketed the figure and closed the door, sliding a chair under the knob. Sleep didn't return that night. The old floorboards in the kitchen had begun to rot near the sink, where years of small leaks had taken their toll. Jack pulled up the damaged boards, intending to replace them, a simple repair that would make the cabin more livable. As he removed a particularly warped plank, his pry bar hit something solid underneath. Not dirt or foundation, but flat and deliberate. He tore away more boards, revealing a trapdoor with a recessed iron ring. Jack hesitated, remembering the neighbor's warning, but curiosity overcame caution. He grabbed the ring and pulled. The hinges protested with a screech that echoed through the cabin. A wave of stale air rushed up from the darkness below. Jack directed his flashlight down, revealing a ladder descending about 8 feet to a dirt floor. "What were you hiding, Elijah?" he murmured, lowering himself into the hole. The space beneath was roughly the size of the kitchen, a small room with walls of packed earth reinforced with timber. Unlike the disorganized chaos above, this hidden chamber was meticulously arranged. A metal desk stood against one wall, surrounded by filing cabinets. The opposite wall held shelves of equipment Jack didn't recognize. Devices with dials and meters, specimen jars containing soil samples, and boxes of carefully labeled rocks and minerals. Most striking was the far wall. A massive corkboard covered every inch, with hundreds of papers pinned to it. Photos, maps, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes were connected by colored string in an intricate web that spread across the entire surface. At the center was a large topographical map of the mountain range, with one location circled repeatedly in red. Jack approached the desk and pulled open a drawer. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, newer and better preserved than the fragments he'd found upstairs. The first page bore an inscription, "The final record of Elijah Blackwood." He flipped through carefully. Unlike the scattered notes above, this journal was coherent and methodical. Elijah had documented years of research about what he called simply the artifact. According to his writings, he believed something ancient was hidden in the mountains, something not of human origin. Jack read passages describing Elijah's expeditions, his measurements of strange energy readings, and his growing certainty that he was close to finding the threshold. The final entries became increasingly paranoid, with references to being watched by town protectors and outsiders with resources. The last entry, dated just days before Elijah's disappearance, read, "I've found it. The coordinates are correct. The entrance exists, but the alignment isn't right. 20 more years until the stars align properly. I've sealed my findings in the tube for safekeeping. They're watching the cabin now. I must hide everything until the time is right. Jack set down the journal, a chill running through him despite the room's stuffiness. He examined the wall of interconnected information more closely. Decades of research, all pointing to a specific location deep in the mountains. The same spot the compass indicated. Behind the desk, partially hidden by a shelf, he spotted a metal tube about 3 feet long. He worked it free and unscrewed one end. Inside was a roll of parchment, brittle and yellowed with age. Jack carefully unrolled it on the desk. It was a map unlike the others, hand-drawn in faded ink on what appeared to be animal skin. The mountain range was recognizable, but marked with symbols rather than words. A path wound through the peaks, marked at intervals with the same symbols Jack had seen carved into trees. At the path's end was a circle drawn in a brownish-red substance that Jack realized with a start might be dried blood. The sound of knocking froze him in place. Someone was at the cabin door. Jack hastily re-rolled the map and climbed the ladder. He closed the trap door and slid a rug over it before answering. Sarah stood on the porch, clutching a notebook. Her eyes widened as she took in his dust-covered appearance. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," she said. "I found more information that seemed important." Jack hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. "Actually, I found something too." He showed her the kitchen floor, but kept the map hidden. As he described the room below, Sarah's expression grew increasingly troubled. "A research room. Hidden all this time?" She stepped toward the trapdoor. "May I?" Jack led her down the ladder. Sarah moved through the space with growing amazement, examining the wall of interconnected information. Her fingers traced certain symbols, her brow furrowed in recognition. "My grandmother had drawings like these," she said quietly, "in her journals." "What do they mean?" Jack asked. Sarah turned to him, her face pale. She never explained, just said they were important to remember. She glanced around again. "Jack, I don't think Elijah was crazy. I think he found something real." Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the cabin windows above. "We should go up," Jack said. "It's getting dark." As they climbed out, Sarah asked, "Did you find anything else down there?" Jack hesitated, thinking of the ancient map. "Nothing important," he lied, unsure why he felt the need for caution. Sarah's gaze lingered on him a moment too long before she nodded. "Be careful, Jack. Whatever Elijah was involved in, it might be bigger than you realize." The town archives occupied the basement of the municipal building, a single room with metal shelving and fluorescent lighting that buzzed overhead. Jack had obtained permission to research local history, though the clerk's reluctance had been palpable. "Most of these records are digitized now," she'd said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Not sure what you'll find down there. Plenty, as it turned out." Jack methodically worked through boxes of town council minutes, property records, and historical documents. The Blackwood name appeared frequently in the early years. Founding members of the town, prominent in local business, respected community leaders. Then, around 1960, mentions of them became scarce, as though the family had fallen from favor. Jack found a newspaper photo of Elijah as a young man receiving a scholarship to study engineering. The accompanying article praised his brilliance, but noted his unconventional theories about local geological formations. After hours of searching, Jack discovered something odd. Gaps in the records. Complete years missing from otherwise meticulous archives. The gaps occurred in a pattern: 1889, 1890, 1909, 1910, 1929, 1930, and so on, approximately every 20 years. The most recent gap was 2009-2010, around the time of Elijah's disappearance. When Jack inquired about the missing records, the clerk shrugged. "Probably lost in the transition to digital. Happens with small-town record-keeping." His next stop was the county office to search property records for the cabin. The title history was straightforward until 20 years ago, when ownership had transferred from Elijah Blackwood to Blackwood Research Trust, an entity with no other documentation Jack could find. At the local diner for lunch, Jack felt the weight of curious glances from other patrons. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit approached his table. "Mr. Harmon," he said, extending his hand. "Martin Cavanaugh. I'm the mayor here in Whisper Ridge." Jack shook his hand. "Nice to meet you." Cavanaugh settled into the opposite seat without invitation. "Heard you bought the Blackwood place. Been doing some repairs, I understand. Word travels fast," Jack commented. "Small town," Cavanaugh smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That property's been vacant a long time. Truthfully, most folks thought it would be demolished eventually." "It's structurally sound," Jack said. "Just needs work. And you're, what? Planning to live there permanently?" "That's the idea." Cavanaugh leaned forward. "Listen, young man, I won't beat around the bush. That property has a complicated history. Might be easier for everyone if it changed hands again. The town council would be willing to offer you a fair price, more than you paid. You could find something more suitable in town." Jack studied the mayor's face. "I'm not interested in selling. I understand. Just know the offer stands." Cavanaugh stood. "Some properties carry baggage, Mr. Harmon. Some things are best left in the past." After the mayor left, Jack returned to the library. Sarah wasn't at the desk, but an elderly volunteer directed him to the basement archives. He found Sarah amid dusty shelves, reviewing microfiche records. "I hoped you might come by," she said. "I found something you should see." She led him to a back corner where she'd assembled a collection of newspapers. These were kept separate from the main archives. Took some convincing to get access. The yellowed clippings documented a series of disappearances dating back to the 1880s. Each occurred in the same region of the mountains, spaced exactly 20 years apart. The most recent was from 2010, a group of hikers who vanished without trace. Each article was annotated in faded ink, the handwriting matching Elijah's journals. Notes in the margins linked victims, analyzed weather conditions during disappearances, and calculated astronomical positions. "There's a pattern," Sarah said quietly. "Every 20 years during a specific celestial alignment. The next cycle is approaching, less than a month away. You believe this?" Jack asked. "I didn't," she admitted. "Then I read my grandmother's journals. She wrote about a group in town, people who consider themselves protectors of some secret. The Blackwoods were originally part of this group before Elijah broke away. The mayor just offered to buy my cabin," Jack said. "Seemed eager." Sarah's expression tightened. "Martin Cavanaugh's family has been here as long as the Blackwoods. His grandfather and Elijah's father had some kind of falling out decades ago." Jack studied the articles again. "This is bigger than one eccentric researcher, isn't it?" "I think so," Sarah nodded. "And Jack, you should know you're attracting attention. People have noticed your questions, your research, including you." She hesitated. "My grandmother asked me to keep an eye on that cabin before she died last year. I didn't understand why until you showed up." As they left the library, Sarah gripped his arm suddenly. "Be careful going home. Take different routes. Watch for followers. You think someone would—" "I don't know," she interrupted. "But in this town, the past doesn't stay buried, and some people prefer it that way." That evening, returning to the cabin, Jack noticed a black SUV parked on the forest road. It pulled away as he approached. At home, he found a note slipped under his door. "Stop looking. For your own safety." Jack crumpled the note and tossed it into the fireplace. Then he retrieved the ancient map from its hiding place and spread it on the table, more determined than ever to uncover what Elijah had found and what the town was hiding. The knock came precisely at noon. Jack peered through the window before opening the door, half expecting the mayor or perhaps Sarah. Instead, a tall, elegantly dressed man stood on the porch. His tailored charcoal suit seemed absurdly out of place against the rustic cabin backdrop. "Mr. Harmon?" The stranger's voice carried a faint accent Jack couldn't place. "May I come in? I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss." Jack hesitated, then opened the door wider. The man entered with a graceful efficiency, surveying the cabin's interior with keen eyes that missed nothing. "My name is Dominic Vega," he said, removing leather gloves. "I'm a collector of rare antiquities and unusual artifacts. I understand you've acquired this property and its contents. News travels fast, Jack remarked, echoing his response to the mayor. Vega smiled thinly. In certain circles, yes. He gestured to the piles of sorted items. I see you've begun cataloguing Elijah's possessions. Fascinating man, brilliant but sadly misunderstood. You knew him? Jack asked, suddenly alert. We had correspondence. I funded some of his later research. Vega moved through the room, examining objects with casual interest. When he reached Jack's keep pile, his movement slowed almost imperceptibly. I'm prepared to make a substantial offer, Vega said, turning back to Jack, for any unusual items you may have discovered. Items perhaps with unusual markings or properties. Astronomical devices, maps, journals, that sort of thing. Why would these interest a collector of antiquities? Jack asked carefully. My interests are diverse, Mr. Harmon. Vega's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's say I'm willing to pay $50,000 for the right items. No questions asked, cash transaction. The sum was staggering, enough to change Jack's life completely. Yet something in Vega's manner raised his guard. I haven't found anything particularly valuable, Jack lied. Mostly personal effects and outdated research materials. Vega studied him, expression unreadable. Perhaps you haven't recognized their significance. I'd be happy to review your findings. I'll keep your offer in mind if I come across anything interesting, Jack replied neutrally. Vega produced a business card from an inner pocket. My contact information. I'm staying at the Ridge Hotel in town. I'll be here for 1 week only. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Harmon. Be cautious about sharing your discoveries with locals. Small towns harbor long memories and ancient loyalties. After Vega left, Jack watched through the window as the man walked to a black luxury sedan, the same vehicle Jack had noticed following him yesterday. Vega paused at the tree line, studying something on the ground before departing. Once the car disappeared, Jack circled the cabin's perimeter. Near where Vega had stopped, he discovered a small device camouflaged against a tree trunk, a motion-activated camera. Jack left it undisturbed, now certain he was being watched. That afternoon, Jack tackled the cabin's remaining unexplored corner, a heavy oak bookcase that hadn't yielded to his initial attempts to move it. With renewed determination, he pushed from one side, feeling it slowly pivot. Behind it, the wall panel looked different from the others, newer, less weathered. Jack ran his fingers along the edges, finding a slight depression. When he pressed it, a small section of the wall slid aside, revealing a hidden wall safe. The combination lock appeared modern compared to the cabin's other fixtures. He tried several possible combinations. Elijah's birth year, significant dates from the research, with no success. Then he remembered the pattern of disappearances, every 20 years. He tried 20, 40, 60. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside lay a small object wrapped in protective cloth. Jack carefully unwrapped it, revealing a metallic fragment about the size of his palm. Its composition was unlike any metal he recognized. Neither silver nor steel, with an iridescent quality that shifted under different angles of light. The fragment was unnaturally cold to touch, as if actively drawing heat from his fingers. Most striking were the markings etched into its surface, symbols similar to those on the map and trees, but these seemed to subtly change when not directly observed, shifting positions when viewed from the corner of his eye. Jack placed it on the desk, watching in amazement as the compass needle he'd found earlier swung violently toward it, then began rotating in an erratic pattern. When he touched the fragment again, a flash of images overwhelmed him. A mountain cave entrance, stars wheeling overhead in accelerated time, a circular chamber deep underground. The vision lasted only seconds but left him gasping, a coppery taste in his mouth. Jack carefully rewrapped the fragment and placed it in his pocket, the weight seeming to exceed its actual mass. He replaced the bookcase to conceal the safe, then checked all windows and doors. The sensation of being watched had intensified. That night, his sleep was fractured by vivid dreams. He saw people throughout history possessing similar fragments, robed figures in ancient temples, medieval scholars in hidden studies, modern researchers in sterile laboratories. Each person aged rapidly after contact with the fragments, their lives consumed by obsession. In the final dream, Jack stood before a massive door deep within the earth, the fragment burning cold in his hand as stars aligned overhead. A voice that seemed to echo from inside his own mind whispered, "The threshold approaches. The vessel awaits. 20 years of sleep ends soon." He awoke at dawn, the fragment pulsing with faint light beneath its wrappings, the compass spinning wildly on his nightstand. Outside, a figure retreated into the tree line. Someone had been watching the cabin all night. Jack knew with sudden certainty that Elijah's research wasn't delusional. Something was hidden in these mountains. Something ancient was awakening, and multiple parties were willing to pay any price to reach it first. Rain lashed against the cabin windows, the late afternoon storm turning the forest into a blur of grey and green. Jack was examining the metallic fragment, documenting its strange properties, when frantic knocking startled him. He quickly concealed the artifact before answering. Sarah stood on the porch, drenched and visibly distressed. Her usual composure had cracked, revealing something raw beneath. "I need to talk to you," she said, voice barely audible above the downpour. "I can't do this anymore." Jack ushered her inside. She paced the main room, running hands through her wet hair, seemingly unsure where to begin. "I haven't been honest with you," she finally said. "About my family, about this town, about why I approached you." "I suspected as much," Jack replied, offering her a towel. "Who are you really, Sarah?" She reached into her bag, producing a worn, leather-bound Bible. "This has been in my family for generations," she said, handling it with reverence. "It contains more than scripture." Sarah opened the Bible, showing Jack pages where family records had been meticulously maintained since the 1800s. Births, deaths, marriages, but also enigmatic entries labeled as observations and signs. "My family has been here as long as the Blackwoods," she explained. "We came as settlers, but that wasn't our primary purpose." She turned to a specific page. "We were sent to watch." The entry described a sacred duty, passed from generation to generation, to guard the path and watch for signs of awakening. "Watch what exactly?" Jack asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Sarah's hands trembled slightly. "There's something in these mountains, something ancient that sleeps for 20-year cycles. My ancestors called it the entity. Others have different names for it." She turned more pages, showing Jack sketches that resembled the symbols he'd found on trees and in Elijah's notes. The original settlers discovered it accidentally, miners digging too deep. Some believed it was a gift, a source of power or knowledge. Others, like my family, recognized the danger. Her voice lowered. The town split into factions. Those who wanted to protect people from it, and those who wanted to use it. Which side were the Blackwoods on? Originally protectors. For generations they helped maintain the seals that kept it dormant. Sarah looked up at Jack. Until Elijah, he became convinced the entity wasn't malevolent but misunderstood. He broke away, dedicated his life to studying it, trying to communicate with it, and the town. Mayor Kavanaugh? The protectors maintain a council, key families who've kept the secret for generations. They call themselves the Watchers. The mayor is their current leader. She hesitated. "They asked me to keep an eye on you, report back if you found anything significant." "And have you?" Jack asked, tension evident in his voice. "Not everything," she admitted. "I told them about the hidden room, but not about how deeply you've been researching. They're concerned you'll continue Elijah's work." Jack considered his next words carefully. "What about Dominic Vega?" Sarah's expression darkened. "He represents another group entirely, the Order. They believe the entity is divine, meant to bestow power on worthy vessels. They've sought it for centuries, across continents. They're dangerous, Jack, willing to sacrifice anything to access what sleeps in the mountain. Why tell me all this now?" Sarah set the Bible down. "Because I've read my grandmother's journals completely now. Elijah was right about one thing. The entity is waking soon. The next alignment happens in 3 weeks. She met his gaze directly. "But he was wrong about it being benevolent. My grandmother documented previous awakenings. The disappearances are just the beginning. What happens if it fully wakes? No one knows for certain. The records suggest catastrophe. She took a deep breath. I'm telling you because I believe you've found something important, something Elijah discovered. And I think you're in danger. Jack considered his options, then retrieved the metallic fragment. Sarah gasped. The key fragment, she whispered. Elijah actually found it. What is it exactly? Part of the locking mechanism, according to legend. My grandmother's journals mention it, a piece of the original seal. She reached out but stopped short of touching it. There should be more pieces. Vega offered $50,000 for unusual artifacts, Jack said. He's watching the cabin. He'll offer more, Sarah said grimly. But eventually he'll just take what he wants. She looked toward the windows. The order doesn't ask forever. A sudden crack of thunder made them both jump. In the momentary silence that followed, they heard distinct footsteps on the porch. Were you followed? Jack whispered. Sarah shook her head, eyes wide. I was careful. Jack motioned her to stay back as he moved toward the door. Before he reached it, the handle turned slowly. He grabbed a poker from beside the fireplace as the door began to open. It started, Sarah breathed. They're coming for the fragment. The door swung open with deliberate slowness, rain gusting through the widening gap. Jack raised the poker, positioning himself between the entrance and Sarah. Lightning flashed, illuminating a figure in the doorway, tall, wearing a hooded rain jacket. Behind him, two more shapes materialized from the darkness. Stay where you are, Jack commanded, his voice steadier than he felt. The lead figure raised his hands slowly, then lowered his hood. Dominic Vega's refined features wore a smile that never touched his eyes. Mr. Harmon, he said smoothly, forgive the intrusion. The storm is quite severe and we noticed your lights. You were watching the cabin, Jack challenged. Why? Vega stepped inside uninvited, his companions following, burly men with impassive expressions and bulges under their jackets that suggested weapons. Merely protecting my investment, Vega replied, his gaze shifting to Sarah. Ms. Conley, how interesting to find you here. I believe your family has opposed my organization's work for generations. Sarah moved closer to Jack. Your work nearly destroyed this town in 1929. Vega's expression hardened momentarily before his smooth veneer returned. Ancient history. We've evolved since then. His attention returned to Jack. I came to improve my offer. Mr. Harmon, my associates believe you've discovered items of significant value. What exactly are you looking for? Jack asked, still holding the poker defensively. You know precisely what, Vega answered, all pretense gone. The key fragment. The map to the threshold. Elijah's research on the celestial alignment. He stepped closer. I'm prepared to offer $250,000. Cash tonight. Jack maintained his position. Nothing here is for sale. Vega sighed as if disappointed in a child. Search the cabin, he instructed his men. Thoroughly. The men moved with practiced efficiency, upending furniture, emptying drawers and tearing open cushions. One headed toward the kitchen and the hidden trapdoor. Stop! Jack lunged forward, but the second man intercepted him, twisting the poker from his grip with surprising strength. Sarah grabbed a heavy lamp, swinging it at Vega, who sidestepped with unnatural quickness. The order has no right, she shouted. The entity isn't meant for you. The entity chooses its own vessel, Vega replied calmly. We merely facilitate the awakening. From the kitchen came the sound of the trapdoor being discovered. Boss, found something. Vega smiled. Ah, Elijah's research room, excellent. Jack and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. The metallic fragment was in Jack's pocket, but the ancient map remained hidden in the desk below. The approaching window cannot be missed, Vega continued conversationally. The alignment happens only once every 2 decades. We've waited patiently for this cycle. The men ransacked the hidden room, voices echoing as they discovered Elijah's research wall. Minutes later, they returned with armfuls of journals and papers. The map? Vega inquired. Not found, one replied. But we got his alignment calculations and coordinates. Vega's expression darkened. The map is essential. "Where is it, Mr. Harmon?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Jack insisted. The storm's intensity increased, wind howling through the still open door. Vega stared at Jack, then at Sarah, calculating. "The seal must be broken properly," he said finally. "Otherwise, the entity remains trapped for another cycle." "I need that map." One of Vega's men approached, whispering something. Vega nodded and addressed Jack again. "We'll continue this discussion soon. The storm is making the mountain roads treacherous." He moved toward the door. "Consider my offer, Mr. Harmon. The Order can be generous to allies and unforgiving to obstacles." As they departed, one of the men stumbled against a table, something falling from his pocket. Neither Jack nor Sarah moved until the sound of an engine faded into the storm. "They'll be back," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "With more men." Jack nodded, securing the door with a chair wedged under the handle. "Why didn't they just take what they wanted?" "They had the advantage. The Order operates in shadows," Sarah explained. "They prefer manipulation to force when possible." "Less attention." She began picking up scattered papers. "But make no mistake, they're killers when necessary." Jack noticed something on the floor where the man had stumbled. A half-disc of metal with a broken edge, inscribed with familiar symbols. He picked it up carefully. "An amulet?" Sarah breathed, examining it. "Half of one, at least." Her hands trembled. "This is an Order artifact, centuries old. Only high-ranking members carry these. What's it for?" "Protection during the awakening, according to legend. The complete amulet supposedly shields the wearer from the entity's influence." She looked at him gravely. "Jack, these people are deadly serious. They've spent centuries pursuing this." Jack felt the weight of the fragment in his pocket. "So what now?" "We need to decode the map before they come back," Sarah said, determination replacing fear. "If they have Elijah's calculations, they can approximate the location. But the map would give them precise directions to the threshold." Outside, the storm continued unabated, nature's fury matching the human storm gathering around them. Jack retrieved the map from its hiding place, and together they spread it on the table, the broken amulet and metallic fragment alongside it, pieces of a puzzle stretching back generations. "If the Order wants to release this thing," Jack said quietly, "maybe we should be the ones to make sure it stays sealed." Morning light filtered through the cabin windows, illuminating the chaos left by the intruders. Jack and Sarah had worked through the night, trying to make sense of Elijah's research system. Papers covered every surface, organized into tentative categories as they attempted to reconstruct his thinking. "His mind was brilliant but scattered," Sarah said, rubbing her tired eyes. "He saw connections no one else did," Jack nodded, examining the strange compass again. "These artifacts must work together somehow. The compass always points to the same location. The key fragment reacts to it, and the map seems to show the path. But we can't read the symbols," Sarah reminded him. "Without understanding what they mean, we're just guessing." Jack tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. Elijah decoded them. He must have kept his translation somewhere safe. They had searched the hidden room thoroughly after Vega's men left, looking for anything that might have been overlooked. The research wall had been partially dismantled, crucial notes taken. What remained were fragments, pieces of a larger puzzle with the central connections missing. "Maybe we're thinking too literally," Jack suggested. "If I had vital information I wanted to protect, I wouldn't just hide it, I'd disguise it." He began examining the furniture in the study, running his hands along the underside of the desk and checking for false bottoms in drawers. Sarah watched, then joined him, methodically inspecting bookshelves and wall panels. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a small irregularity in the wooden desk. "That grain pattern doesn't match." Jack pressed the area, and a small compartment popped open in the desk's side panel. Inside lay a hand-bound book, its cover unmarked, except for a single symbol matching the one at the center of the ancient map. "Elijah's cipher book," Sarah whispered. The book contained page after page of symbols, paired with their English translations. Elijah had meticulously documented the strange language, creating a comprehensive dictionary of sorts. Each entry included notes on context and usage, revealing a man obsessed with understanding every nuance. "This is incredible," Jack said, carefully turning the brittle pages. He spent decades creating this. Armed with the cipher book, they returned to the ancient map. Symbol by symbol, they began translating the markings, blotting their meaning on a modern topographical map of the region. The map doesn't just show the location, Sarah realized as the translation progressed. It's describing a specific time. These symbols relate to star positions, seasonal markers, the celestial alignment Vega mentioned. Jack nodded. "According to Elijah's notes, it happens every 20 years. And the next one is in less than 2 weeks, Sarah added grimly. As their translation continued, the true nature of what Elijah had discovered emerged. The location marked on the map was labeled as the threshold, a place where the boundary between worlds thinned during specific astronomical alignments. "Look at this," Jack said, pointing to a passage near the bottom of the map. "It describes the metallic fragment as the key that turns darkness to light." Sarah translated another section. "And this part warns that the threshold opens only when the stars align in the ancient pattern, when the vessel is prepared to receive what waits beyond." Jack felt a chill. What exactly is waiting beyond this threshold? Sarah shook her head, continuing to translate. Elijah believed it was an entity of pure energy, something that has existed since before human civilization. His notes suggest it's been trapped in a dormant state, awakening briefly every 20 years when the alignment occurs. They worked through the afternoon, piecing together the full story. The metallic fragment was part of an ancient locking mechanism. The skeleton key operated some aspect of the threshold itself, and the compass was calibrated to detect the energy emanations from the entity's resting place. "The Order believes this entity will grant them power," Sarah explained, drawing on her family's records. "They want to release it, become its vessel. My family and others have worked for generations to keep it contained, and Elijah, he was different. He didn't want power, he wanted knowledge." She studied a page of his notes. "He believed communication was possible, that the entity wasn't malevolent, just alien, misunderstood." Jack's phone rang unexpectedly, startling them both. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Mr. Harmon," Vega's cultured voice came through. "I trust you've had time to reconsider my offer. I told you before, nothing here is for sale. I'm aware you've found the map," Vega continued smoothly, "and that you possess the key fragment. My patience is limited, as is the window for the approaching alignment." Jack's blood ran cold. "How did you—" "We've been watching Elijah for decades," Vega interrupted. "We know what he found. The only question is whether you'll benefit from cooperation or suffer the consequences of defiance." The line went dead. Jack set the phone down slowly. "He knows about the fragment," he told Sarah, "and the map." Her face paled. "Then we're out of time. We need to find the threshold before they do." Jack nodded, looking at the half-translated map and cipher book. "According to this, the threshold is located in a cave system about 15 miles into the mountains. We need to get there first and understand how to ensure the seal holds. The Order won't give up," Sarah warned. "They've waited centuries for this opportunity." "Neither will we," Jack replied, gathering the artifacts. "Pack what you need. We leave at dawn." First light found them already deep in the forest, following the unwavering guidance of the strange compass. Jack led the way, backpack heavy with supplies, the metallic fragment securely wrapped and tucked inside. Sarah followed close behind, carrying Elijah's cipher book and the ancient map in a waterproof case. Neither had slept much. After Vega's call, they'd spent hours preparing, gathering provisions, studying topographical maps, and memorizing key translations from the cipher book. They'd left the cabin at 4 a.m., using back trails to avoid being seen. The mountain terrain grew increasingly difficult as they ascended. Game trails gave way to trackless wilderness, forcing them to navigate around sheer rock faces and dense underbrush. The compass remained their constant guide, pulling them ever deeper into remote territory. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a steep valley. Taking shelter beneath an outcropping, they paused to eat and check their bearings. According to the modern maps, we're entering an area with no official trails, Sarah said, comparing their route with a forestry service map. Few people come this far in. Jack nodded, studying the compass. Elijah did. Look, he pointed to a weathered strip of fabric caught on a nearby thorn bush. Faded red, the same color as a jacket, in photographs of Elijah they'd found in the cabin. As they continued, signs of previous expeditions became more frequent. A rusted piton hammered into a cliff face. A rotting length of rope anchored around a tree trunk. Bootprints fossilized in once muddy ground, now hardened by years of exposure. Some of these markers could be decades old, Sarah observed, examining an abandoned camp stove, half buried under pine needles. People have been searching for the threshold for generations. By late afternoon, they reached a stream cutting through a narrow ravine. As they filled their water bottles, Jack noticed something protruding from the rocky bank, a weathered stone tablet half submerged in the water. Carefully, he extracted it from the mud. The stone bore familiar symbols, matching those on the map and in Elijah's cipher book. Sarah translated quickly. The path narrows. The worthy continue. The threshold awaits the aligned stars. A marker, Jack realized. Confirmation we're on the right path. Sarah studied it closely. This stone isn't natural to this region. Someone brought it here, placed it deliberately. The order? Maybe, or maybe whoever originally sealed the entity. They made camp as twilight descended, finding shelter in a small cave set back from the stream. As darkness enveloped the mountain, Sarah retrieved her grandmother's journal from her pack, turning to passages about the entity. My grandmother never witnessed an awakening herself, she explained, reading by flashlight. But her grandmother did, in 1929. She wrote that the mountain trembled for 3 nights as the stars aligned. Those who ventured close reported dreams of voices speaking in unknown tongues, promising knowledge beyond mortal understanding. Jack fed small branches into their modest fire. What does your family believe the entity actually is? Sarah closed the journal thoughtfully. The oldest stories say it came from the stars, long before humans walked these mountains. Not a physical being as we understand it, but a consciousness of pure energy that requires a vessel to fully manifest in our world. And every 20 years it can potentially escape? Not escape exactly. More like reach through. The threshold thins, allowing limited interaction with our world. She stared into the flames. My family believes it's been trying to find a suitable vessel, someone who can fully release it. Elijah? He may have been a candidate. He was certainly sensitive to its influence. Sarah looked up at Jack. My grandmother wrote that those who can sense the entity are rare. They're drawn to it, though they may not understand why. Jack thought about his inexplicable decision to purchase the cabin, his immediate connection to Elijah's research. Had he been drawn here by forces beyond his understanding? As if reading his thoughts, Sarah added, the influence works subtly. Dreams, intuitions, a sense of purpose without clear origin. Their conversation was interrupted by a faint whirring sound overhead. Jack extinguished their fire immediately, and they moved deeper into the cave. Drone, he whispered, as a small aircraft passed overhead. Lights blinking in the darkness. They're tracking us, Sarah said grimly. The Order must have people in the mountains already. They remained silent until the drone passed. When they were certain it was gone, Jack unfolded the map, studying it by the dim light of a covered flashlight. We need to change our route, he decided. They'll be watching the direct path to the coordinates. We'll circle around, approach from the western ridge instead. That adds at least a day to our journey, Sarah warned. We don't have a choice. We can't let them follow us to the threshold. They spent the night taking turns on watch. When dawn broke, they set a false trail heading north before doubling back and taking their planned western detour. The compass protested this deviation, the needle straining toward the true direction, but they had no choice. The entity had waited centuries. It could wait one more day, while they evaded those who would unleash it upon an unsuspecting world. The western approach proved arduous. requiring them to traverse a narrow ridge with sheer drops on either side. By midday, they reached a vantage point overlooking their destination, a shaded ravine where the ancient map indicated the cave entrance should be. Through binoculars, Jack spotted movement near the ravine's eastern edge. Order members, he confirmed. At least 3 of them. They've established a camp. Sarah studied the terrain. They're guarding the main entrance. But according to Elijah's notes, there should be a secondary access point. They circled wide, approaching from above through dense forest. The compass needles spun wildly now, as if confused by their proximity to its target. The metallic fragment in Jack's pack had grown colder, emanating a chill that penetrated its protective wrapping. As they descended toward the ravine's western slope, Jack halted suddenly. Before them, nearly hidden by vegetation, a narrow fissure cut into the rock face. Ancient symbols were carved around its edges, weathered by centuries of exposure. "This is it," Sarah whispered, comparing the markings to the cipher book. "The hidden entrance." They squeezed through the opening into darkness. Their flashlights revealed a narrow passage that widened as they proceeded deeper. The air grew noticeably colder, carrying a metallic scent unlike anything in the natural world. The passage opened into a larger chamber with smooth walls that seemed almost polished. Jack's flashlight beam caught something embedded in the stone, a crystalline formation that emitted a faint blue luminescence when the light touched it. "Look," Sarah breathed, pointing around the chamber. Similar crystals studded the walls throughout the space, their glow intensifying as Jack removed the metallic fragment from his pack. The fragment itself began to pulse with matching light, establishing a rhythm like a heartbeat. "These aren't natural," Jack said, examining a crystal cluster without touching it. "I've never seen any mineral formation like this." The chamber bore signs of previous visitors. Modern climbing pitons had been driven into crevices. Empty food wrappers, decades old, littered one corner. A rusted lantern stood on a rock shelf. "We're not the first to find this place," Sarah observed, "but perhaps the first in a long time," Jack replied, indicating a thick layer of undisturbed dust covering most of the floor. Their exploration revealed a deeper network of tunnels branching from the main chamber. Following the compass and the increasingly bright glow of the crystals, they chose a passage that descended at a steep angle. The tunnel eventually opened into a second, larger chamber. Here, evidence of extended habitation was unmistakable. A camp had been established, cot, portable stove, storage containers all abandoned but relatively preserved in the cave's dry atmosphere. "Elijah," Sarah said, examining a journal left open on a makeshift desk. This was his final camp. Jack inspected the walls, now heavily encrusted with the glowing crystals. They illuminated the chamber with pulsing blue light that made shadows dance eerily. The metallic fragment vibrated in his hand, resonating with the crystal's energy. The journal's final entry was dated just days before Elijah's disappearance. Jack read aloud, "I've found the inner chamber. The threshold lies beyond the crystal gallery, just as the ancient texts described. The alignment is wrong, 20 years too early. I've documented the mechanism, but I dare not attempt to open the way yet. Something watches me in my dreams now. It knows I'm here. It's eager." Sarah examined Elijah's detailed sketches of what appeared to be a massive door mechanism. "He found it," she whispered. The actual threshold, a passage at the chamber's far end, continued deeper into the mountain. As they approached it, the compass began to spin wildly, then stopped abruptly, its needle pointing directly into the darkness beyond. "That's where we need to go," Jack said. Sarah nodded, but hesitation showed in her expression. "Jack, we should be careful. Elijah was brilliant, but something changed him. The entity's influence grows stronger the closer we get." "I feel it," he admitted. "Like a pressure in my mind, whispers just beyond hearing." They gathered supplies from their packs, leaving behind anything non-essential. Jack carefully wrapped the metallic fragment again, though its light still leaked through the cloth. As they prepared to venture deeper, a sound echoed from the tunnel behind them, voices distant but approaching. "They've found the entrance," Sarah whispered urgently. "We need to hurry," Jack replied, leading the way into the passage. "Find the threshold before they do." The crystal formations grew denser as they descended, their pulsing light making artificial illumination unnecessary. The air became charged with static electricity that raised the hair on their arms and crackled between their fingertips when they touched. The passage twisted downward in a spiral pattern, leading them ever deeper beneath the mountain. Jack felt a growing certainty with each step, not just that they were approaching something ancient and powerful, but that whatever waited had been expecting them all along. Behind them, the voices grew louder. The order was coming, and the race to determine the entity's fate had entered its final stage. "Move faster," Jack urged, guiding Sarah through the twisting passageway as voices echoed behind them. The tunnel branched repeatedly, forming a natural labyrinth illuminated only by the pulsing crystals. "They're gaining," Sarah gasped, clutching the cipher book to her chest. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, multiple flashlight beams bouncing off tunnel walls, the clatter of equipment, Vega's voice issuing crisp commands. Jack pulled Sarah into a narrow side passage, pressing against the cold stone as lights swept past their hiding spot. "The energy signature is strongest down the main tunnel," someone reported. "The fragment must be there?" "Proceed carefully," Vega's distinctive voice replied. "Harmon and the girl are ahead of us. Remember, we need them alive until we understand the mechanism." When the voices faded, Jack and Sarah continued deeper into the side passage, using the glow of the crystals to navigate. The tunnel narrowed until they were forced to crawl through a tight space that opened suddenly into a vast chamber unlike anything they'd seen before. The ceiling soared at least 30 feet above them, the walls entirely encrusted with the luminescent crystals that pulsed in perfect synchronization, bathing the space in ethereal blue light. At the center stood a stone platform carved with intricate symbols. "This isn't on the map," Sarah whispered, her voice echoing slightly. Jack approached the platform cautiously. "Different tunnel system. We've gone off Elijah's charted path, or he never found this chamber," Sarah suggested, examining the ancient markings. "These symbols are older than the ones in the cipher book. Similar but evolved somehow." The metallic fragment grew noticeably colder in Jack's pocket, its vibration intensifying to an almost painful degree. When he placed it on the platform, the crystals throughout the chamber flared brilliantly before settling into a faster, pulsing rhythm. "It's responding?" Sarah breathed. "The fragment is connected to this place." A low rumble shook the chamber, dust and small stones showering from the ceiling. The platform began to rotate slowly, symbols aligning in new patterns. "We need to go," Jack said, retrieving the fragment hastily. "That noise will bring them right to us." They found another tunnel leading away from the chamber, descending at a steeper angle than before. The passage twisted sharply, disorienting them as they fled deeper into the mountain's heart. "Wait!" Sarah called suddenly, pointing to markings on the wall. "These are the same symbols from Elijah's final journal entry." Jack examined the carvings. "We've circled back. We're approaching the threshold from a different direction." The tunnel widened into another chamber, smaller than the last but clearly modified for human habitation. Wooden support beams reinforced the ceiling. A generator stood silent in one corner, connected to industrial lights. Equipment was arranged methodically on folding tables, scientific instruments, recording devices, supplies. "This is it," Sarah realized. Elijah's final camp, where he lived for months studying the threshold. Jack examined the setup. He was prepared for a long stay. "Look at these provisions. Enough for at least 6 months. In the center of the workstation lay a waterproof container." Jack opened it carefully, finding a voice recorder wrapped in protective material. He pressed play. Elijah's voice emerged, strained and exhausted. "Final recording. Date. I've lost track. The order has found me. They don't understand what they're dealing with. The entity isn't what they believe. Not a benefactor, not a god. It's ancient beyond comprehension, and it's hungry after centuries of containment. I've modified the sealing mechanism to be permanent, but it requires specific activation during the alignment. The fragment must be placed in the primary receptacle, while the key unlocks the secondary mechanism. Then, static interrupted the recording briefly before continuing. If you're hearing this, you found my research. The order must be stopped. They'll sacrifice anything for power, even humanity itself. The coordinates for the true threshold are hidden in my final cipher. Remember, the stars don't guide us to it, they guide it to us. When the alignment happens, the walls between worlds thin everywhere, but only at the threshold can passage occur. It must remain sealed, no matter the cost. The recording ended with a final, urgent warning. It speaks to me now, constantly, promising knowledge, power, transcendence. Don't listen. Those are honey-coated lies, hiding something monstrous. Seal it forever, please. Jack, Sarah whispered, pointing toward a tunnel opening they hadn't noticed before. Look. The passage beyond was larger, its walls smoothly carved as if melted rather than chiseled. The crystals here grew in perfect geometric patterns, their light steady rather than pulsing. Before they could investigate, voices echoed from multiple directions, the Order members converging on their position. Go, Jack urged, pushing Sarah toward the geometric passage. I'll delay them. We can't separate, she protested. The mechanism needs both of us. A flashlight beam caught them from one tunnel entrance. Ah! Someone shouted. Jack grabbed Elijah's recorder and shoved it into Sarah's hands. Take the east tunnel. I'll create a diversion and meet you at the threshold. Go! Sarah hesitated, then sprinted toward the eastern passage as Jack headed in the opposite direction. The metallic fragment pulsed in his pocket, its cold energy spreading through his body as he plunged into darkness. The sounds of pursuit splitting behind him. Jack ran blindly through the tunnels, guided only by the crystal light and an inexplicable certainty about which turns to take, as if something were calling him deeper, toward the mountain's ancient heart. The tunnel twisted downward in a perfect logarithmic spiral, defying natural cave formation. Jack descended as if in a trance, drawn forward by an invisible force. The crystals grew larger and more intricate, no longer resembling mineral formations, but rather technological components of incomprehensible design. The passage ended abruptly, opening into a vast chamber that stole Jack's breath. The ceiling arched at least 50 feet overhead, perfectly hemispherical. The walls formed a complete circle, smooth as polished glass. Most astonishing was the floor, transparent crystal revealing an impossible sight beneath, the night sky, stars wheeling slowly as if he stood in space looking down at the cosmos. Not possible, Jack whispered, his voice echoing strangely. The chamber's architecture defied explanation. No natural process could have created this space, nor could any human civilization, known to archaeology, have possessed the technology to craft it. At the center of the room stood a raised dais with a pedestal at its heart, carved from the same crystalline material as the floor. Jack approached cautiously, drawn by a subtle magnetism that seemed to pull at both his body and mind. The metallic fragment in his pocket had grown painfully cold, vibrating with increasing intensity. When he removed it, the fragment glowed with inner light, symbols on its surface shifting and rearranging themselves. The pedestal contained a depression that matched the fragment's shape perfectly. Before Jack could examine it further, a voice spoke from behind him. Magnificent, isn't it? Beyond human comprehension. Jack turned to find Dominic Vega standing at the chamber entrance, flanked by his men. They held Sarah between them, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. The threshold chamber, Vega continued, stepping forward. Precisely as described in texts dating back millennia, a place where the boundary between dimensions becomes permeable. Let her go, Jack demanded. Vega smiled thinly. In due time. First, I believe you have something that belongs on that pedestal. The fragment isn't yours. It isn't anyone's. Mr. Harmon, it's a key, a component in a lock designed aeons ago by beings whose understanding of reality far exceeds our own. One of Vega's men shoved Sarah forward. Vega addressed her directly. Ms. Conley, your family has dedicated generations to protecting humanity from what waits beyond the threshold. Such noble short-sightedness. We've protected everyone from something you don't understand, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. Vega laughed softly. On the contrary, the Order has studied this entity for centuries. We understand that power requires sacrifice. Evolution demands it. What exactly do you think is on the other side? Jack asked, stalling for time as he assessed their options. Transcendence, Vega replied simply. A being of pure energy, unfettered by physical limitations. It requires a vessel to manifest in our reality, a worthy vessel. You, Jack realized. You think it's going to choose you. I have prepared for decades, Vega confirmed. The prior alignment cycle, Elijah was found wanting. He lacked the necessary conviction. As they spoke, Jack became aware of movement beneath the transparent floor. The stars were aligning into a specific pattern, constellations shifting into precise positions. The alignment has begun, Vega observed, following Jack's gaze. We have less than an hour before the optimal moment. The fragment, please. One of Vega's men stepped forward, drawing a pistol. Don't make this difficult. Jack weighed his options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. Reluctantly, he held out the fragment. The man snatched it and delivered it to Vega, who examined it with reverence. Perfect, Vega breathed. Undamaged after all these centuries. He approached the pedestal, positioning the fragment above its matching depression. For thousands of years, this entity has reached out to humanity, seeking the right conduit. Tonight, that ancient search ends. As Vega prepared to place the fragment, Jack noticed Sarah's expression change. She caught his eye and glanced deliberately toward her jacket pocket, where something bulged slightly. The broken half of the Order's amulet, she still had it. Vega positioned the fragment carefully, then produced a matching piece from inside his coat. The counterpart, he explained, recovered from the previous chamber decades ago. Together, they form the key that opens the way. The transparent floor beneath them began to glow as the star pattern completed its alignment. Energy pulsed upward through the crystal, illuminating the chamber with increasing intensity. Bring them closer, Vega commanded. They should witness what they tried to prevent. As the guards pushed them forward, Jack felt rather than heard a deep vibration running through the chamber. The stars beneath the floor now formed a perfect pattern, centered directly below the pedestal. Where they converged, a point of darkness appeared. Not merely absence of light, but something deeper, as if reality itself thinned at that precise location. The threshold opens, Vega announced, his voice taking on a ceremonial quality. The vessel awaits. He placed both halves of the metallic fragment into the pedestal. They joined with a flash of light, completing a circuit that sent energy coursing through the chamber's architecture. The crystals along the walls brightened to painful intensity. From the darkness beneath the floor, something stirred, a presence vast and ancient, awakening from long dormancy to reach through the thinning barrier between worlds. The chamber thrummed with energy as Vega raised his arms in a ceremonial gesture. His followers arranged themselves in a circle around the pedestal, their expressions reverent. For centuries we have waited, Vega intoned. For generations we have preserved the knowledge, prepared for this moment. The darkness beneath the crystal floor expanded, tendrils of shadow reaching upward like smoke against glass. Where they touched, the barrier between worlds thinned visibly. What you're seeing, Vega explained, his voice carrying an almost hypnotic cadence, is not malevolent as Ms. Conley's family has believed. It is a being of pure energy, consciousness unfettered by physical limitations. Jack watched the writhing darkness with growing unease. If it's so benevolent, why does it need to be sealed away? Not sealed away, Vega corrected. Protected. The Ancient Ones created this chamber to preserve it until humanity was ready. He gestured around them. This technology is beyond our comprehension, created by civilizations that existed long before recorded history. As Vega spoke, Jack noticed Sarah slowly working her hands free from their bindings. She caught his eye briefly, then looked meaningfully at the pedestal, where both halves of the metallic fragment now formed a complete device. The entity has waited patiently, Vega continued, reaching out during alignments, seeking worthy vessels. Those who disappeared in these mountains over centuries weren't victims, they were candidates. Those found wanting were discarded. "And you think you're worthy?" Jack asked, keeping Vega's attention on him. "I have prepared my entire life," Vega replied. "Sacrificed everything." The entity grants unimaginable power to its chosen vessel, the ability to manipulate energy, matter, even time itself. The darkness beneath them coalesced into a more defined shape, still abstract, but undeniably sentient. Pulses of energy radiated outward, and with each wave, the chamber's crystals flared in response. "The alignment peaks in 20 minutes, one of Vega's followers announced, checking instrumentation they had set up around the chamber. Vega nodded, then addressed Sarah. "Your family has acted as jailers for generations, Miss Conley, denying humanity its destiny out of fear and ignorance." "We protected people," Sarah responded. "The records in my family Bible tell the truth. Those who communed with the entity were destroyed, consumed from within." "Weak vessels," Vega dismissed. "Unworthy of the power offered." Jack noticed ancient mechanisms stirring to life within the chamber walls, technology disguised as geological features activating after centuries of dormancy. The pedestal itself had begun to transform, components shifting and reconfiguring around the metallic fragment. "You see?" Vega gestured at the changing chamber. "The process has begun. The containment vessel is preparing to release its occupant." Jack's eyes widened at the word vessel. He recalled Elijah's recording. The entity wasn't what the Order believed. He looked at the darkening area beneath the floor with new understanding. This wasn't a doorway to another dimension. It was a prison. The threshold was the barrier keeping something contained. Sarah had worked her way closer to Jack. "The containment mechanism," she whispered urgently. Elijah modified it. "We need the skeleton key." Jack nodded slightly, feeling the weight of the antique key in his pocket. He'd brought it almost as an afterthought, uncertain of its purpose until now. "The threshold is at optimal permeability," another Order member announced. "Containment fields destabilizing." Vega removed his jacket, then his shirt, revealing a torso covered in tattooed symbols matching those in the chamber. "I offer myself as vessel," he declared. "Body and soul aligned to receive the entity's essence." Jack caught Sarah's eye and nodded slightly. In one fluid motion, she lunged forward, driving her elbow into the nearest guard's stomach. Jack simultaneously tackled the man holding him, creating a moment of chaos. "Stop them!" Vega shouted as Jack rolled to his feet and sprinted toward the pedestal. Sarah grabbed Elijah's recorder from her pocket and pressed play at maximum volume. Elijah's voice filled the chamber. "The mechanism must be reversed. The pedestal turns counterclockwise to seal, clockwise to open." A guard tackled Sarah, cutting off the recording, but the message was delivered. Jack reached the pedestal and grasped the embedded fragments, twisting with all his strength. The mechanism resisted, then slowly began to rotate counterclockwise. "No!" Vega roared, his composure shattered. He shoved his followers aside, advancing on Jack with unexpected speed. The darkness beneath the floor writhed violently as the threshold began to close. A sound beyond hearing vibrated through the chamber, not audible but felt, a psychic pressure expressing ancient rage. Vega reached Jack, his eyes wild. When he grabbed Jack's arm, energy crackled between them. "You don't understand what you're rejecting," he hissed. "It offers transcendence." "It offers destruction," Jack replied, continuing to turn the mechanism. Elijah discovered the truth. The containment vessel, the true purpose of this advanced technology, had begun to reactivate. The entity's furious resistance manifested in waves of energy that made the air shimmer and sparked painful feedback through everyone's nervous systems. Vega's followers dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. But Vega himself seemed energized by the feedback, his eyes now glowing with the same blue luminescence as the crystals. "It has chosen me already," he announced, his voice resonating unnaturally. "You are too late." Energy coursed visibly beneath his skin, following the pathways of his tattooed symbols. He reached toward the pedestal, his fingers elongating impossibly, as the entity began using him as a conduit to maintain the opening. Sarah broke free from her captor and rushed to Jack's side. "The key!" she shouted over the mounting psychic storm. "There's a keyhole underneath!" Jack fumbled for the skeleton key, understanding at last its true purpose in Elijah's plan to seal the threshold permanently. Chaos erupted in the threshold chamber. Jack dropped to his knees, searching for the keyhole beneath the pedestal, while Sarah fought to keep Vega at bay. The transformed man moved with unnatural speed, his body crackling with energy as the entity partially inhabited him. "You can't stop what has already begun," Vega intoned, his voice layered with multiple tones speaking in unison. "The vessel has been prepared through generations of selective breeding." Sarah grabbed a piece of equipment from one of the Fallen Order members and swung it at Vega. He caught it effortlessly, the metal warping in his grip. Jack's fingers found a small depression beneath the pedestal, a keyhole hidden in the intricate designs. He fumbled for the skeleton key, its metal now burning cold against his skin. The moment he touched it to the pedestal, both began to glow with resonant energy. "The key!" Vega snarled, his attention snapping to Jack. He flung Sarah aside with inhuman strength and lunged toward the pedestal. Jack jammed the key into the lock and turned it. The mechanism responded with a deep, reverberating click that shook the entire chamber. The crystal floor beneath them shifted, patterns realigning as ancient machinery activated fully. Vega reached the pedestal and grasped Jack's throat, lifting him bodily. "You understand nothing of what you interfere with," he growled, face contorting as the entity's influence grew stronger. "This prison has held a god for millennia. Its freedom will elevate humanity beyond your comprehension." Jack struggled against Vega's grip, his vision darkening at the edges. Behind them, the darkness beneath the floor churned violently, sensing its opportunity for escape diminishing. The Order members who remained conscious scrambled to disrupt the sealing process, attacking the chamber's mechanisms with whatever tools they possessed. One man began smashing crystals along the wall, each shattered piece releasing bursts of energy that scorched his hands. Sarah recovered from Vega's attack and grabbed the broken amulet half from her pocket. According to legend, it could protect against the entity's influence. She lunged forward, pressing it against Vega's back where his tattooed symbols converged. Vega screamed, a sound more alien than human, and released Jack, who dropped gasping to the floor. Where the amulet touched him, Vega's skin blackened and cracked, energy discharging in violent arcs. The final turn. Jack wheezed to Sarah, gesturing at the key. "We have to complete the sequence." Together, they grasped the key and forced it through its final rotation. The pedestal locked into position, with a sound like ancient gears engaging. The fragments embedded in its surface pulsed with increasing frequency. Vega recovered, his movements becoming more erratic and inhuman. The entity was fighting for control, using him as a physical anchor to prevent its re-imprisonment. He clawed at the pedestal, fingernails breaking as he tried to dislodge the fragments. "You doom yourselves to cosmic irrelevance," he hissed in that multi-layered voice. "The entity offers evolution, the next step for humanity. It offers extinction," Sarah countered. "It's consuming you already." Indeed, Vega's form was beginning to destabilize, energy bleeding from his eyes and mouth, his skin taking on a translucent quality that revealed pulsing light beneath. The chamber's architecture responded to the key's activation. The crystal floor thickened visibly, reinforcing the barrier between worlds. The darkness below raged against its prison, sending psychic waves of fury that manifested as physical pain in everyone present. Jack located the complete amulet on the floor where Vega had dropped it. Its counterpart to Sarah's broken half was identical, except for one crucial difference, where hers was carved with symbols of containment. This one bore markings of release. Understanding bloomed in Jack's mind. "Sarah, the amulets are opposites. One opens, one seals." Sarah nodded in sudden comprehension. She tossed her half to Jack, who caught it and quickly united it with its counterpart. The complete amulet hummed with power, symbols on both halves aligning to form a new configuration. The keyhole! Sarah pointed to a matching depression in the chamber floor, directly above, where the entity's darkness pressed most insistently against the barrier. Jack placed the completed amulet into the depression. It fit perfectly, sinking into place with a resonant tone that harmonized with the chamber's vibrations. The amulet began to rotate on its own, energy flowing through the symbols etched on its surface. The entity realized what was happening. Its rage manifested physically, the chamber shaking violently as it fought against permanent imprisonment. Cracks appeared in the walls, crystals shattering and raining down around them. Vega, now more entity than human, threw himself at the amulet, clawing desperately to remove it. "You cannot comprehend what you reject," he screamed, voice barely recognizable. "Godhood offered freely." Sarah grabbed a fallen piece of equipment and struck Vega with all her strength. He staggered back, momentarily disoriented. Jack seized the opportunity to complete the amulet's alignment, turning it to match the position shown in Elijah's notes. The skeleton key pulsed in response, both artifacts now working in concert, components of an ancient locking mechanism designed by forgotten civilizations to contain a cosmic threat. "It's working!" Sarah shouted over the cacophony of grinding stone and shattering crystal. The floor beneath them solidified further, the starfield visible through it beginning to fade as the threshold sealed. The entity made a final desperate assault. The darkness surged upward, pressing against the barrier with such force that reality itself seemed to warp around it. Vega convulsed, energy pouring from him as the entity attempted to manifest fully through its chosen vessel. "We need to get out," Jack yelled, grabbing Sarah's arm. "This whole chamber is collapsing." The ancient mechanisms had begun their final sequence, permanently sealing the threshold while ensuring the chamber itself would be inaccessible to future treasure hunters. The entrance they had used was already closing, stone grinding against stone as passages realigned. As they ran for the exit, Jack looked back one last time. Vega stood at the center of the maelstrom, arms outstretched, his body dissolving into pure energy as the entity consumed its failed vessel completely. The tunnel collapsed behind them as they fled, ancient stone grinding against stone as the chamber's self-destruction sequence continued. Crystal fragments rained from the ceiling, shattering on impact and releasing bursts of energy that scorched the walls. "This way!" Sarah shouted over the deafening rumble, pulling Jack toward a side passage. The main tunnel ahead was already blocked by fallen debris. They squeezed through a narrow fissure, emerging into a smaller chamber where the blue crystal light still pulsed, though more erratically now. The floor shuddered beneath their feet, the entire cave system destabilizing as the threshold sealed permanently. "There's something wrong," Jack gasped, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. "The sealing mechanism, it's not working properly." Sarah examined the crystal formations that lined the walls. Their rhythmic pulsing had become irregular, some fading entirely while others flared with dangerous intensity. The order damaged too many components, she realized. "The system is malfunctioning." A violent tremor shook the chamber, widening cracks in the ceiling. Through one such fissure, they glimpsed the threshold room below. The crystal floor now completely opaque, the pedestal still rotating slowly as it completed its function. Vega was nowhere to be seen, but the remaining Order members frantically sought escape routes as the chamber collapsed around them. "The entity is still fighting," Jack observed, feeling its rage as a pressure against his mind. "It's not fully contained yet." Sarah pulled something from around her neck, a pendant on a silver chain. "My family's pendant," she explained. "Passed down through generations." It's supposed to protect the wearer from the entity's influence. The pendant was small, but intricately carved with symbols similar to those in the threshold chamber, though arranged in a protective rather than binding configuration. The legends say it shields the mind, she continued, pressing it into Jack's palm. Take it. You're more susceptible to its influence than I am. How do you know that? Sarah's expression softened. I've watched you since you arrived. The cabin, the artifacts, they called to you specifically. There's a reason you felt compelled to buy that property, to follow Elijah's research. The entity was reaching out, trying to find another potential vessel after Vega. Jack stared at the pendant, its metal warm against his skin, unlike the painful cold of the other artifacts. He started to refuse it, then stopped as another realization hit him. The sealing mechanism, he said slowly. According to Elijah's final recording, it requires someone to complete the process manually from inside the chamber. Sarah's face paled. No, there has to be another way. Jack checked the tunnel ahead. It appeared intact, leading upward toward potential safety. But he could feel the entity's presence growing stronger again. The threshold was failing to close completely. It's what Elijah planned to do before he disappeared, Jack said quietly. Someone has to go back and stabilize the mechanism until it completes the full sealing sequence. That's suicide, Sarah protested. The chamber is collapsing. Anyone inside when the threshold seals would be trapped forever. Another violent tremor shook the passageway, more debris falling around them. Time was running short. I'll go, Sarah said suddenly, her voice firm. My family has guarded this secret for generations. It's my responsibility. She turned toward the fissure, leading back to the threshold chamber, but Jack caught her arm. No, he said. You know the history, the legends. If anyone survives this, it needs to be you, to make sure the truth isn't forgotten again. Before she could argue, he slipped the pendant back over her head. Keep this. I think I'll need something else where I'm going. Jack retrieved the skeleton key from his pocket, still glowing with energy even after being removed from its lock. According to Elijah's notes, it was synchronized with the threshold mechanism now, part of the same system. Elijah made modifications, Jack recalled. There might be a way to trigger the permanent seal without being trapped. He gestured to the tunnel ahead. That passage should lead to the surface. I'll meet you there if I can. Sarah gripped his shoulders. There has to be another option. We're out of time, Jack replied, as another section of ceiling collapsed nearby. The entity is already recovering. If it breaks free now, the threshold might never seal again. Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but she nodded in understanding. From her pocket, she withdrew the broken half of the Order's amulet. Take this. If the legends are true, it might offer some protection. Jack accepted it, then pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, don't wait. Get to the surface and make sure nobody ever finds this place again. With a final look, he turned and squeezed back through the fissure toward the collapsing threshold chamber. The entity's presence grew stronger with each step, its influence pressing against his mind like an ocean of ancient malevolence. The broken amulet grew warm in his hand, its protective symbols activating as he approached the chamber. Jack clutched it tighter, focusing on Elijah's notes about the sealing mechanism. The old researcher had discovered something, a modification to the ancient design that might allow for activation without permanent entrapment. As Jack descended toward the pulsing heart of the threshold, the skeleton key began to resonate in his pocket, vibrating with increasing intensity as it synchronized with the chamber's damaged systems. The entity sensed his approach, its rage focusing directly on this last obstacle to its freedom. Behind him, Sarah watched his descending figure until he disappeared into the glowing blue chaos below, then turned reluctantly toward the passage that promised escape, carrying the burden of a truth that must never be forgotten and the fading hope that Jack might somehow find his way back from the threshold between worlds. Dawn broke over Whisper Ridge, painting the mountains in soft gold and pink. Sarah sat alone on a fallen log at the forest's edge, watching the sun climb above the peaks. 3 days had passed since the cave system collapsed, sealing the threshold, and Jack beneath tons of rock. Search and rescue teams had combed the area after she'd reported a hiking accident, claiming that she and Jack had been exploring when a tremor caused a cave-in. They'd found no trace of him. The mountain had reclaimed its secrets. The official story that circulated through town described a tragic accident, a cave collapse that claimed the life of the cabin's new owner. Only Sarah knew the truth of what lay beneath the mountain, what had been contained there, and the sacrifice made to keep it sealed. She rose stiffly, muscles still aching from the ordeal, and began the now familiar hike back to Elijah's cabin. Her cabin now in a way. With no body recovered and no next of kin identified, Jack's limited possessions remained in a kind of limbo. Sarah had taken it upon herself to protect what remained of Elijah's research, and to continue the watch her family had maintained for generations. The cabin looked different somehow as she approached, as if the burden it carried had been lifted. The oppressive atmosphere that had clung to it since Elijah's disappearance had dissipated, replaced by a quiet stillness that felt almost peaceful. Inside, Sarah continued the work of sorting and cataloguing. Much of Elijah's research had been destroyed or taken by the Order, but enough remained to piece together the full history. She was transcribing his notes into her family's Bible, ensuring the knowledge wouldn't be lost again. A knock at the door startled her. Few people ventured this far from town, especially after the accident. She opened it cautiously to find Mayor Kavanaugh standing on the porch, his usual confident demeanor subdued. "Ms. Conley," he greeted her with a slight nod. "May I come in?" Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. Kavanaugh entered, surveying the cabin with knowing eyes. "The town council met last night," he began, without preamble. "Several prominent families have left Whisper Ridge rather suddenly. The Vega estate has been abandoned, their assets liquidated. The Order is gone," Sarah stated. Kavanaugh's gaze sharpened. "Then you know." "I know everything," she confirmed. "About the Watchers, the Order, the entity beneath the mountain. I know your family has been protecting this town for generations." A tense silence stretched between them before Kavanaugh sighed heavily. "The alignment has passed. The threshold?" "Permanently sealed," Sarah answered. "Jack Harmon made sure of it." Relief softened the mayor's features. "Then our watch is finally over." Sarah shook her head. "Not over, changed. The entity is sealed, but knowledge remains. Others might come looking, just as the Order did. And you intend to continue the watch." It wasn't a question. "Someone must," Sarah replied. "My family has carried this responsibility for generations. I won't abandon it now." Kavanaugh studied her for a moment, then nodded. "The council will support you discreetly. The property taxes on this cabin have been permanently waived." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Harmon, he understood what he was doing at the end?" "He understood everything," Sarah confirmed. "Perhaps better than any of us." After Kavanaugh left, Sarah returned to her work. As evening approached, she heard another sound at the door, not a knock but a scraping. She opened it to find no one there, only a single stone placed on the threshold. When she turned it over, a familiar symbol was carved into its surface, one meaning return in the ancient language. Sarah scanned the tree line, heart pounding. Nothing moved in the gathering dusk, yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She pocketed the stone and went back inside, hope kindling despite her best efforts to suppress it. That night, as she prepared for bed, a faint blue glow caught her attention. On the windowsill sat a small crystal she'd brought back from the caves, a reminder of what had happened. But now it pulsed with gentle light, synchronized to a rhythm like a heartbeat. Over the following weeks, Sarah transformed the cabin, clearing out the clutter while preserving the most important research. The hidden room beneath became a secure archive where she documented everything about the threshold and the entity it contained. Visitors from town occasionally brought supplies, but largely she lived in peaceful isolation. maintaining the watch in her own way. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant peaks, movement at the forest's edge caught her eye. A figure emerged from the trees, familiar yet changed. Jack walked toward the cabin with steady purpose, stopping at the foot of the steps. He looked different, his hair streaked with white, his eyes holding a depth that hadn't been there before. A small glowing crystal hanging from a cord around his neck. "You found Elijah's escape tunnel," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded. He knew more than any of us realized. He'd been preparing the way out for 20 years. "But the threshold is sealed," Jack confirmed. "Permanently. What was contained there will never escape. And the Order? Those who survived have scattered. Their purpose is gone." He climbed the steps slowly. "But there will always be others drawn to power they don't understand. The watch continues." Sarah stood, hope and caution warring within her. "You were down there for days. How did you survive?" Jack touched the glowing crystal at his neck. "Some questions don't have simple answers." His gaze turned to the mountains, where the last light of day caught the distant peaks. "But I'm here now, and I understand my purpose." Together they faced the mountains, guardians of an ancient secret, keepers of a truth that must never be forgotten. Whatever trials awaited, whatever forces might seek what lay beneath the threshold, they would face them together. A new generation of watchers standing guard over mysteries beyond human comprehension.